Good morning. Good evening. Good afternoon, and remember, context is everything. Media Network founder and CEO John Michael is reading a textbook cover to cover. Today, we read Toward Victory of World War II. Yesterday, we read about the Allies' advance after the Axis powers, the previous section before that, advanced themselves. Check it out. My name is John Michael here at the Context is Everything Media Network. I'm the founder, I'm the CEO, I'm the CFO, I'm the social media marketer. Please subscribe. I'm at 59 subscribers, and thank you, 59 wonderful individuals. You're all very special, and I appreciate your viewership. Please, let's make it to 60. I will give a big thumbs up on the next channel, on the next video, for number 60. Yes. Thank you. Toward Victory. Setting the scene, General Douglas MacArthur stood at the dock on Corregidor in March 1942. Corregidor, Corregidor. I don't know what that is. In March 1942, that's where Douglas MacArthur stood, General of the U.S. Army. Although the United States Army and Filipino defense forces had battled to keep the Japanese out of the island chain, they had not been successful. Thousands of Allied civilians, men, women, and children were being held in prison camps throughout the islands, Philippines. And American and Filipino soldiers were under attack on the Bataan Peninsula, Bataan Peninsula. After reaching Australia, MacArthur pledged his determination to free the Philippines with the words, "I shall return." Allied troops found the war in Southeast Asia and the Pacific was very different from that in Europe. Most battles were fought at sea, on tiny islands, or in deep jungles. War in the Pacific. New heading. At first, the Japanese won an uninterrupted series of victories. They controlled much of Southeast Asia and many Pacific islands. By May 1942, the Japanese had gained control of the Philippines, killing several hundred American soldiers, the Japanese did. And some 10,000 Filipino soldiers during the 68-mile Bataan Death March. One survivor described the ordeal as a macabre litany of heat, dust, starvation, thirst, flies, filth, stench, murder, torture, corpses, and wholesale brutality that numbs the memory. Many Filipino civilians risked and sometimes lost their lives to give food and water to captives on the march. Soon, however, the tide of the Pacific War began to turn. In May and June 1942, United States warships and airplanes severely damaged two Japanese fleets during the battles of the Coral Sea and Midway Island. These victories greatly weakened Japanese naval power and stopped the Japanese advance. After the Battle of Midway, the United States took the offensive. That summer, under MacArthur's command, the United States Marines landed at Guadalcanal in the Solomon Islands. Victory on Guadalcanal marked the beginning of the island-hopping campaign. The goal of the campaign was to recapture some Japanese-held islands while bypassing others. The captured islands served as stepping stones to the next objective. In this way, American forces gradually moved north toward Japan itself. By 1944, the United States Navy, commanded by Admiral Chester Nimitz, was blockading Japan, and American bombers pounded Japanese cities and industries. On October 1944, Douglas MacArthur, General of the United States Army, began to fight to retake the Philippines. The British, meanwhile, were pushing Japanese forces back in the jungle of Burma and Malaya. Despite such setbacks, the Japanese government rejected any suggestions of surrender. New heading: The Nazis defeated. Hitler, too, scorned talk of surrender. "If the war is to be lost," he declared, "the nation also will perish." To win the assault on Fortress Europe, the Allies had to use devastating force. I guess that Fortress Europe was what the Axis powers called their European stronghold. I don't know. They're insinuating something, but they didn't make that clear, and they've never said that before. The Allies advance. After freeing France, Allied forces battled toward Germany. As their armies advanced into Belgium in December 1944, Germany launched a massive counterattack. At the bloody Battle of the Bulge, which lasted more than a month, both sides took terrible losses. The Germans were unable to break through. The battle delayed the Allied advances, but it was Hitler's last success. His support with Germany was declining, and he had already survived one assassination attempt by senior officers in the German military. By this time, Germany was reeling under round-the-clock bombing. For 2 years, Allied bombers had hammered military bases, factories, railroads, oil depots, and cities. Cities? That means that they killed innocent people. In one 10-day period, bombings almost erased a huge industrial city of Hamburg. Allied raids on Dresden in February 1945 killed as many as 135,000 people. That's not good. By March, the Allies had crossed the Rhine River into western Germany. From the east, Soviet troops closed in on Berlin. In late April, American and Russian soldiers met and shook hands at the Elbe River. Everywhere, Axis armies began to surrender. The end in Europe. In Italy, guerrillas captured and executed Mussolini. In Berlin, Hitler knew that the end was near. As Soviet troops fought their way into the city, Hitler committed suicide in an underground bunker. After just 12 years, Hitler's 1,000-year Reich was bomb-ravaged. On May 7th, Germany surrendered. Officially, the war in Europe had ended. The next day, May 8th, 1945, was proclaimed VE Day, Victory in Europe. Okay. Well. Defeat in Germany. Well, it's good to see the Nazis fall. Lots of people in Dresden died, though. I didn't realize that is that the same amount of people that were killed in the atomic bomb in Japan? It's pretty bloody to kill 135,000 people in, a week? 10-day period, or what was it? Either way, good thing they lost. They're very bad, those Nazis. With war won in Europe, Allies poured their resources into defeating Japan. By mid-1945, most of the Japanese Navy and Air Force had been destroyed, yet the Japanese still had an army of 2 million men. Wow. The road to victory, it appeared, would be long and costly. Really? How bizarre. After everyone else fought after everyone else forfeited, after everyone else surrendered. Japan was like, we still got 2 million, we're ready to go. Invasion versus the bomb. Some American officials estimated that an invasion of Japan would cost 1 million or more casualties. In bloody battles on the islands of Iwo Jima and Okinawa, the Japanese had shown that they would fight to the death rather than surrender. Oh. Beginning in 1944, some young Japanese chose to become kamikaze pilots who undertook suicide missions, crashing their explosive-laden airplanes into American warships. They hoped these efforts would stop the Allies and save their nation from defeat. Interesting fact, I think it was like 1273, the year when the Mongols were invading Japan, and the Mongols were thwarted in their invasion because their ships invading Japan were hit by a tsunami or some sort of an act of God, wind on the water and all that. And they were like, oh, we can't do it. They got on land and they got pretty handily defeated. And then again, they tried like 8 years later, the Mongols, to take over Germany. Because they took over a ton of places around the world, the Mongols did, What was it, the thing that they say? They reduced the Earth's carbon footprint by like 10%, the Mongols, by killing so many people. The Mongols tried again to invade Japan 10 years later. And they were thwarted yet again by an act of God, winds on the water. So what the Japanese called those divine winds that saved them from the Mongol threat were the kamikaze winds, the ship-destroying winds, the divine winds. So the name kamikaze for the suicide missions crashing their explosive-laden airplanes into American warships was named after the divine winds from the Mongol threat. While Allied military leaders planned for invasion, scientists offered another way to end the war. Since the early 1900s, scientists had understood that matter made up of atoms could be converted into pure energy. In military terms, this meant that by splitting the atom, scientists could create an explosion far more powerful than anything yet known. During the war, Allied scientists, some of them German and Italian refugees, raced to harness the atom. In July 1945, they successfully tested the first atomic bomb at Alamogordo, New Mexico. News of this test brought the new American president, Harry Truman. Truman had taken office after Franklin Roosevelt died, FDR, unexpectedly on April 12th of 1945. He realized that the atomic bomb was a terrible new force of destruction. Still, after consulting with his advisors, he decided to use the new weapon against Japan. At the time, Truman was meeting with other Allied leaders in the city of Potsdam, Germany. They issued a warning to Japan to surrender or face utter and complete destruction. When the Japanese ignored the deadline, the United States took action. Hiroshima. On August 6, 1945, an American plane dropped an atomic bomb on the mid-sized city of Hiroshima. The bomb flattened 4 square miles and instantly killed more than 70,000 people. In the months that followed, many more would die from radiation sickness, a deadly after effect from the exposure to radioactive materials. On August 8th, the Soviet Union declared war on Japan and invaded Manchuria. Again, Japanese leaders did not respond. The next day, the United States dropped the second atomic bomb, this time on the city of Nagasaki. More than 40,000 people were killed in this second explosion. Still, the Japanese cabinet argued, should they surrender or continue to fight? Finally, on August 10th, Emperor Hirohito intervened, an action unheard of in Japanese emperor, and forced government to surrender. On September 2nd, 1945, the formal peace treaty was signed on the board of American battleship Missouri, which was anchored in Tokyo Bay. Whoa. An ongoing controversy. Dropping the atomic bomb brought a quick end to the war. It also unleashed terrifying destruction. Ever since, people have debated whether the United States should have used the bomb. Why did Truman use the bomb? First, he was convinced that Japan would not surrender without an invasion that would result in enormous loss of both American and Japanese lives. Truman also may have hoped that the bomb would impress the Soviet Union with American power. At any rate, the Japanese surrendered shortly after the bombs were dropped and World War II was ended. Oppenheimer, in theaters now. Looking ahead, after the surrender, American forces occupied the smoldering ruins of Japan. In Germany, meanwhile, the Allies had divided Hitler's fallen empire into 4 zones of occupation. In both countries, the Allies faced difficult decisions about the future. How could they avoid the mistakes of 1919? Treaty of Versailles. After World War I, that crippled Germany to the point where they were like, well, we're just going to go for a extreme nationalist who says this is not fair. And then everything else that he said was pretty wrong. But Hitler did get power because of the Treaty of Versailles, which was the peace accord after World War I. So they're saying, hopefully we don't make that mistake again, because they certainly made a mistake there. Probably did make a mistake with the bombs as well. How could they avoid the mistake of 1919 and build the foundations for a stable world peace? That's it. Have a good day. Enjoy the weather, and God bless.